got backups, make sure you test your recovery process.
Hey Stan, I hear you have a story about testing your backups to prevent ransomware attacks.
Well, somebody pointed me at this article at KrebsOnSecurity.com where Brian Krebs interviewed a couple of, I guess, researchers or leaders in this space, and the topic was very interesting. So apparently, most companies who pay the ransom, or many companies, maybe not most, but many companies that pay ransom to ransomware gangs, they actually have backups. And so the article that Brian Krebs wrote, it kind of like highlighted a few, I thought, interesting reasons for why that might be, and it gave a few recommendations for what organizations should do. I just wanted to share that with our viewers here. So one of the interesting observations to me is that for a lot of companies who are in this position that they have to deal with ransomware, they basically have never attempted, even though they have backups, they've never attempted to like restore the backups or see what it would look like to have those backups be restored. I think they, I don't know if this was from a real situation that they quoted in the article or from something like conjecture, but they're saying, if you have petabytes of backups out there and you have like a fast internet connection, it might still take you like a few weeks or a few months to download all this backup data. Another reason they mentioned for why companies sometimes get in trouble with ransomware and end up having to pay the ransom, even though they do have those backups, is that if they store their backups off-site, sometimes they have that key, the encryption key, to make sure that those backups are secure and protected off-site. So those encryption keys or the information needed to unlock, it's sometimes actually inside of the compromised organization. So the organization itself, the keys might have become encrypted. And finally, one of the other reasons is that adversaries are sometimes actually able to corrupt the backups somehow because, again, they're not off-site or they're not out there somewhere. So the backups are in the same network as the network that became encrypted. So I think this all kind of points to, if you think about the article, some of the reasons mentioned, to the fact that you really need to have recovery plans available, and organizations, that do have backups, they need to think about the recovery procedure. It's not enough to just have them and send them somewhere. It's important to also engineer the solution for actually utilizing them in case it's never ever necessary. And so for that, in the article, there's a couple of recommendations in terms of doing tabletop exercises or conducting drills to make sure that, the employees and everyone is familiar with the process for taking those backups and restoring them, that the organizations are, companies are familiar with the order or the sequence in which the restoration should happen. So what is the most important part of the network to restore first before restoring any other parts of the network, and how should that flow? So I thought it was really interesting. We hear a lot about ransomware. We hear a lot about companies paying, but I thought it was interesting that some companies end up having to pay even though they seemingly did everything right, but they're just unable to get those backups. It will take longer to get those backups off of the tape or wherever they are, and they're just not ready to recover, even though the data is out there and backed up.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic. Reading through the article where they're not exactly sure in what order to back up the systems. And if you kind of don't know if there's kind of dependencies, it's kind of almost useless to have. And I think another issue is, for companies that don't have backups is cost. Like, do they want to pay for twice the amount of space to hold the same data? And some companies just may just defer to that and just try to protect their network instead of even creating some backups at all.
Yeah, so I think it all comes along with your whole disaster recovery plan of your organization and contingency planning, whereas you should have your resiliency in place and backing up your data and testing, making sure you're exercising, practice exercising these particular backups or incrementals, whatever it may be. That you need to practice in the resiliency of your organization.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that I didn't think of that that I learned out of the article was that apparently, some organizations, they didn't do that level of thinking through the problem. And I think in one instance, they were saying like it's possible that it could take like years to get all the data from offsite and bring it into your environment. And just, not thinking through that problem ahead of time, well, I think it could become a challenge when the time is right to actually execute it. So I agree with you, Kim, Chris. People need to test these plans and see how it goes. Make sure that they're ready.
And if I can add that some companies get the decryption key still, and it still doesn't decrypt all their data, and it could be after decryption a lot of missing data or corrupted data. So it's definitely a good idea to restore your backups properly and planned out.